To conclude our first look at forms, what we're going to do now is just take the form data and then we're going to send it to ourselves via email. This is going to be a very simple, bare bones way of doing this, just to make a point, if you will. And later on in subsequent videos, we're going to make this type of thing more real. But for now, let's go back to our form processing code. And you're going to notice that I've added a few things. First of all, this little code bunch here, well, code block rather, I've essentially grabbed the values from the other form fields, favorite color, favorite website, and so forth. And so we'll get back to that in a second. What I've done here, instead of simply printing out the sentence to the page with the values from the first, from the first two values that we gathered from the form, what I've done is I've actually inserted this information inside the variable email underscore message. This is a new variable. And the reason I did this is because I wanted to easily handle all this information here so that we could use it to send an email. So how do we send an email in PHP? There are several ways, but the simplest is to use something called the mail function. And you could see it here. Now I'm going to give you just a little bit of theory with regards to this line of code here, this mail function. First of all, what is a function? A function is a bunch of code, a group of code, if you will, that provides some sort of functionality, hence the name functions. PHP has thousands of built-in functions, and much of PHP's power is actually wrapped up in this construct. We're going to actually have a dedicated video on functions, on how to use them properly, and actually how to build your own. Yep, PHP allows you to build your own custom-made functions, and they offer a lot of advantages over just having your code flying around your PHP pages willy-nilly. Anyhow, back to the mail function. We're going to use this particular function to send our email. So like all functions, well, most functions anyway, they have a certain level of configuration, meaning you can control how the function behaves to a certain extent by sending it information. And you send the information to the function by inserting data right here. So, well, actually, you know what? Let me just type something out. A little crash course on functions. Here would be the mail function without any data sent to it. This is the data that we're sending above here, and this is the mail function without the data. So this information here is exactly, you're sending data to the function, you're sending information to the function so that the function can do what it does. And what you would insert in between these brackets, it really depends on the function, and we're going to get into that in the dedicated functions video. But I wanted you to understand that what the point of all this was. We're essentially, again, in a nutshell, we're essentially sending information to the mail function about how to do its job. So let me just delete this. For the mail function, the first thing it wants to know is where to send a mail to. So I'm sending it to my own email address. The second bit of information, which is separated by the comma here, let me just highlight that. See, there's a comma, another comma here. So these are separate pieces of information that the mail function is expecting to receive from us. Anyhow, the first slot tells the mail function where to send the email. The second slot tells the mail function what the subject of the email is. So if you when you open up the your email client, whether it be Outlook or Firefox's email client, you have your subject line. This is a subject line that you're actually going to see. And finally, we have the mail body, basically the body of the message. Now, what I've done is I've inserted this variable, which we built here. So essentially, this text is going to be inserted into the mail body that PHP is sending for us using the mail function. I could have just as easily placed this code, this cut and paste that into here, but when you have starting to have long emails and we formatted it, and when we start applying, specific types of formatting, it's best to just insert a variable. Keeps the code cleaner anyway. Now, this is a very basic representation of how to do this. Actually, if you were going to do this on a live site where the data was, where the information you were gathering, with the form was critical, you would want to validate the data. You'd want to check to see that the user entered in the data correctly. So the first thing that I would do is probably check to see if they entered in a proper email address. Again, we're going to get into all that kind of stuff later on. So I just wanted to point that out. This is very simple, bare bones functionality here. We're just our goal is just to show you an end-to-end solution, just to see it work, because it's always fun to see things work. What I've done here is I've included the last 3 form field values that we've collected using the request object in a PHP through a request object. And but I haven't inserted those values into our email message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that to you guys to do. And all you have to do is just do what we've done here and just insert these values, and they will get automatically emailed to whatever email address you decide to send it to. So that pretty much covers our basic look at processing forms with PHP. There's a few more things that could be covered in terms of how to process certain types of, different types of form fields and so forth. But what I want to do now is I want to move on to other PHP basics so that we can so we can proceed with these lessons properly, because a lot of the other form processing issues that might come up really requires that you have other basic knowledge so that you can do it properly. So in the meantime, what I would suggest that you do is you write out the code that you've seen demonstrated in front of you. It's very important that as we go along with the tutorials that you do so, because watching is always is one thing, but when you actually get your hands dirty and you start writing code and making mistakes and correcting mistakes, that's when you really will gain a deeper understanding of what's going on in front of you.